Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on motion 17362 in the name of Sue Webber on ending the war against Scotland's motorists. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Sue Webber to speak to and to move the motion up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Conservatives will always stand up for motorists, unlike the left-wing parties in this chamber who continue to treat them with disdain. For too long, road users in this country have faced punitive and ill-considered measures that do little to support our economy, communities or environment in a fair and effective way. Motorists are not the enemy. They are parents doing school runs, workers getting to jobs, tradespeople running businesses and carers reaching the most vulnerable. Ordinary people going about their everyday lives. Motorists are essential to Scotland's economy and crucial for our connectivity, but they are being punished by this SNP government through punitive low-emission zones, controlled parking zones, botched disincentives to use car use, endless roadworks, a constant battle against pothole-ridden roads. And then there's the SNP's ludicrous plans for a 50-mile-an-hour national speed limit.
Nonsense.
If you don't mind, Mr Cole-Hamilton, I'll come to you in a second when I've got a bit more traction, shall we say. Despite what the SNP say in their amendment, it is not an exaggeration to describe this as a war against motorists. Cars remain the most popular form of transport in Scotland, and hard-working Scots feel they are increasingly treated as an afterthought. This is what people tell me, this is how they feel, about relentless policies that make their lives harder and more expensive without a feasible alternative being available. Mr Cole-Hamilton.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm very grateful to Sue Webber for giving way. Liberal Democrats believe we should incentivise getting out of cars and into public transport, but we do agree that we need to improve Scotland's road networks, not least to Inverness in the far north, the A9, the A96, the A82. I was surprised to see no mention of those main infrastructure projects in the Conservative motion. Is that an ambition?
Sue Webber.
An omission, Mr Cole-Hamilton. I think the general point is that it's roads across the country, and we didn't want to specify and single out single roads in this to make it more of a... we wanted to make it relevant for all of Scotland and not just those that rely on some of our rural connectivity. But going back to the points, this insidious drip-drip effect of anti-car policies is hampering our economy and connectivity and punishing already hard-pressed Scots. The SNP must stop viewing car drivers as bogeymen and end their war on Scotland's motorists, moving away from these damaging policies. The SNP, after all, have scrapped their target to reduce car use by 20% by 2030 after Audit Scotland said there was no costed delivery plan or clear milestones. And this is a stark admission of failure, but one that was entirely foreseeable. Audit Scotland report confirmed what many of us suspected. There was no costed delivery plan, no measurable milestones and no realistic understanding of how such a dramatic reduction could be achieved without crippling those who rely on cars daily. What we need is a pragmatic shift in approach. No more fines, zones or restrictions. We should be encouraging positive change through investment in EV infrastructure, incentives for greener choices, including public transport park and rides, and proper road maintenance that makes driving safer and more efficient, not more difficult. SNP ministers need to show some common sense and focus on incentives, not penalties, to encourage motorists to be part of an affordable transition. The implementation of low-emission zones have hindered businesses, residents and motorists in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen and Dundee. Fines in Glasgow and Edinburgh are extremely punitive, starting at £60, doubling with each repeat offence up to a cap of £480 per day, placing a disproportionate burden on low-income drivers who cannot afford to replace older vehicles. And the reality is that the low-emission zones have cost over £13 million of taxpayers' money to set up in Scotland, and they're making a minimal difference in air quality. It's important that ministers review their effectiveness before any more new zones are proposed or that current ones are expanded, and we must reconsider these punitive fines. And unbelievably, the SNP have spent 3 years and £500,000 of taxpayers' money on their plan to cut national speed limits on single carriageway roads from 60 to 50 miles an hour. Yet there is no clear evidence that a blanket reduction would deliver significant safety benefits. Such a reduction would impact commuters and significantly impact the agriculture, haulage and logistics sectors across Scotland, placing further strain on productivity. Because Scotland's road network is in a state of steady decline and motorists are paying the price. Almost 500,000 potholes have been reported to Scottish local authorities since 2021, and Edinburgh has been named as Scotland's pothole capital, with more potholes than Aberdeen, Dundee and Glasgow put together. Resurfacing rather than refilling is the best solution to tackle Scotland's pothole problem. And this is obvious when you consider that almost £500 million has been spent fixing potholes since 2022, yet our roads are still in a terrible condition. This must also be backed by a more coordinated effort between the Government, Scottish Government, the Roadworks Commissioner, local authorities and utility companies. Too often, roadworks sites sit idle, causing needless congestion and frustration, or when one utility company is finished, often it's only a few weeks, sometimes days, before the next company comes in and digs up exactly the same stretch of road. It's no wonder it's frustrating for residents and drivers. So ministers must seek ways to encourage less inactivity on roadwork sites and to incentivise finishing roadworks ahead of time. And finally, we are calling for greater action to future-proof Scotland's electric vehicle charger network. The Just Transition, a draft Just Transition Plan for Transport, acknowledges that increasing EV car ownership alone is not enough. The charging infrastructure must be put in place if more people are to start using EVs. Motorists cannot be expected to shift to EVs without confidence that charging is accessible, affordable and convenient. And as an EV user, charging issues were the biggest barrier to me making that choice to get an EV car. And that's the case for so many, especially for those who do not have home charging and rely on the public charging network. Our charging network has different kilowatt chargers, all with different fees, all with different penalties for overstay, issues that are contingent on the decisions taken by each local authority. So today we're bringing forward a vote calling on the SNP to finally end that war on motorists. Their anti-car policies are damaging our economy and punishing hard-pressed Scots. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you, Ms Webber. I now call on Minister Jim Fairley to speak to and to move Amendment 17362.4. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'd like to thank colleagues for the opportunity to set out to Parliament the importance and the impact of our policies and investments relating to road users, infrastructure and to the wider sustainable transport. Firstly, the war on motorists language used out of context to maximise that political traction, failing to consider the sensitivities of such language is frankly reckless, given the wider global considerations. And I would urge members, and I would genuinely urge members, to consider this during our deliberations today. Now, the First Minister has spoken about the dangers of the pushback against the climate crisis and the need for unity to make a renewed case for climate action. Talking about a war on motorists is unfortunately falling into that trap. I'll take you in a second. But hopefully we can reset the level of our discussion in order to find a solution that I think we can all agree to work on. I'll take the intervention.
I was wondering if I could refer to anything in my remarks today that I did not acknowledge that motorists want to be part of an affordable transition.
Minister.
I think what I'm talking about here is the language that's being used to bring this debate to the Chamber in the first place. Now, I recognise the fundamental importance of our roads and their users to the economic, social and environmental well-being of Scotland, and that includes drivers, hopefully of more EVs and public transport. The Conservatives' deregulation of bus services in the 1980s and the 1990s has resulted in decades of decline, meaning there isn't viable public transport provision in many communities, especially in rural areas. Now, there's poll after poll will demonstrate that people want access to high-quality, affordable transport. They want to reduce their travel costs, they want to take climate action and sustainable alternatives to car use, and I believe that that is probably the same right across this chamber, because I'll take your intervention.
Grateful to the Minister for taking intervention. At the Net Zero Committee this week, there was discussion of what more the Scottish Government could do to ensure we have reliable and affordable bus services. Will the Minister talk about what the Government will actually do? Minister.
I will try to come on to that as I make my way through my contribution. Because going back to what I said, we all accept they want to get the alternative to car use, because I think that right across this chamber that's what we want to do. We need to reduce carbon emissions from transport, especially from car use. And the Scottish Government remains committed to reducing Scotland's reliance on cars and encouraging a shift towards public transport and active travel, alongside a switch to electric vehicles. Let me make the point that I'm making. And I should like to point out that Scotland reached its target of 6,000 public EV charge points 2 years early through a combination of Scottish Government funding, delivery by local authority and private sector investment, and with approximately 24,000 additional public charge points to be delivered by 2030 through continued Scottish Government funding and increasing private sector investment. Now,
Liam Kerr.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for taking the intervention. Does he regret the failure of all the ministers who came before him to set out a costed delivery plan and milestones to reduce car use by 20% by 2030? And will he?
Minister.
I don't think it's a case of regretting what other ministers have done. I'm standing here as the Minister today talking about the debate that has been brought before us. But what I'd like to say is I recognise that supporting electric car use contributes to Scotland's connectivity, benefiting the economy, education, social mobility and leisure right across Scotland. And we clearly support our environmental challenges with regards to emissions. Now, there is a point here for the UK Government. They could also reduce VAT rates paid on public charging points to 5% to help to support an equitable and just transition for those who cannot charge EVs at home. In terms of bus, the connectivity is being further enhanced by free bus travel for over 2 million people in Scotland, providing alternative for those who can make the switch. And whilst I've noted the historic bus decline, it still accounts for the vast majority of public transport journeys, with around 334 million journeys made annually. Now, responsibilities for local road provision and some local bus services lie with the local transport authorities, and they will be able to have more control through the transport legislation, which puts more power into their hands. The low emission zones that were mentioned by Sue Webber are key to improving air quality, protecting public health, encouraging more sustainable transport options, and have been implemented in over 320 cities across Europe. In Glasgow, where the low emission zone has been in place since 2023, air quality benefits are already being accrued, with the average nitrogen dioxide levels in the zone down by approximately 20% compared to 2022. As the Scottish Government welcomes the independent role of the Scottish Roadworks Commissioner, but we have concerns that the punctuality of bus services can be hampered by roadworks. I have met the Road Commissioner about these bus operators and the concerns that they have raised. I've also met the bus operators, and I'm meeting local authorities, and I am intending to continue that collective conversation so that we can find these solutions. And I'll continue to engage collaboratively with the Scottish Roadworks Commissioner and the roadworks industry to find reasonable solutions to help in this area, which include incorporating bus data into the Scottish Roadworks Register and providing more consideration
Minister,
to bus
if you could bring your
services.
remarks to close and move your amendment, please.
And bringing more consideration to the bus services and the code of practice for coordination of roadworks. Presiding Officer, I will finish my remarks there, and I'll move the amendment in my name. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Claire Baker to speak to and to move Amendment 17362.1. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are having a very short debate this afternoon that's attempting to cover many areas of transport policy. We've already heard from the Conservative spokesperson and the Government Minister, who have given an overview over some of the key dividing lines that the Tory motion today is trying to create. There are areas of the Conservative motion worth considering. There has been problematic implementation of LEZ in Glasgow, and the state of Scotland's roads and the cost to motorists of potholes. But I think it is a stretch to describe this environment as a war on motorists and to seek to create a division on an issue which we as a Parliament are all agreed on, the need to reduce emissions to improve air quality and meet our climate change targets. The motion refers to road users as solely motorists, but bus passengers, cyclists and pedestrians all use roads, and the car-centric focus of the motion doesn't recognise the need to balance the need of all road users and reduce their reliance on the personal car. The dropping of the 20% car use reduction target is a disappointment, an empty promise that wasn't backed up by leadership or action required to achieve it, as Audit Scotland made clear. It is not enough to just set targets without any way to reach them, without a costed delivery plan, without measurable milestones, or without the governance in place to track progress. To tackle the climate crisis and transform our transport system, we need the headline to be backed up with work that will make it a reality. Transport does remain our single largest source of emissions, but rather than a reduction in car use, we have seen record levels of vehicle ownership and an increase in kilometres driven. Key to reducing car use is ensuring that people have transport choices, and that means an awareness of the reality of the choices and the limits that people face. According to the Scottish Household Survey, a quarter of our households do not have access to a car, and that figure rises significantly in our cities and among lower income households. For those people, public transport is not an option, it is a vital service that allows them to live their lives. But under the Scottish Government, bus routes have been axed, rail fares have been increased, and users of ferry services have endured chaos.
Craig Hoy.
For giving way. Is she aware that many bus companies are now facing extreme financial pressures as a result of the Labour Government's imposition of increased national insurance? And this is resulting in increased fares, reduction in services and disinvestment in the bus fleet. What does she say to the Labour Government about this impact that will undoubtedly affect bus services in Scotland?
I think the member would probably agree with me that the decline in bus services in Scotland has happened long before a Labour government has been introduced. And actually we've seen years from the SNP where we've seen a reduction in the bus routes that are available to communities and more people don't have access to a bus. So I don't accept the argument that's been put forward. We recognise that people are often too reliant on cars to get to where they need to be. Public transport links are lacking, and without private car transport, some people would be cut off. Part of this is a failure to invest in regional solutions, and that means that some bus networks have been dismantled as local authority funding has been hollowed out. We need to look at how to ensure more local involvement in delivering bus services for those areas. I am quite pressed for time. It's a 4-minute. I think I have 5. If it's very brief, Minister.
Briefly, Minister.
The point that the member makes about certain areas not beginning to get access to bus, is that not more to do with the fact that it's a deregulated market and it doesn't matter how much public money you put into it, we actually have no control at all over timetables or fares?
Claire Baker.
Yeah, I do agree with the Government's motion around deregulation and the impact that's had, but under an SNP government we've done very little to reverse that. The legislation was introduced, but we've seen no activity because of a lack of funding at local authority area to actually move forward on that agenda, which is something I think we do agree on. We need to look at how to ensure more local involvement in delivering bus services for those areas so that alternatives to the car are being provided. But when the car is the only option, we need to work to reduce reliance on it. Concessionary travel schemes encourage the use of public transport and particularly buses for certain groups. But to persuade more people out of cars, public transport has to be reliable, affordable and accessible. That is why Scottish Labour has pledged to remove peak fares for good as the first step to delivering a fairer pricing structure that means more people can afford to use public transport and it would be competitively priced as opposed to driving, particularly when a family is travelling. The reality is that price increases are pushing people into cars. We need to foster an environment where the car isn't the default. We need to make it not just feasible to choose an alternative method, but for it to be a positive choice. That means not adding significant costs in terms of money or time. Part of that is addressing the crumbling road network that is a result of the long-term underfunding of local authorities. The issue of potholes have already been covered. I would say that as a member of the Cross-Party Group on Music, the LEZ scheme in Glasgow implementation has been difficult for the night-time economy. And if I just say something about electric cars, we need to do more to increase the attraction of electric cars. And we need to do more to make sure that the transport strategy that works for all our communities.
Thank you. Move the amendment. Thank you. We are a bit pressed for time this afternoon. I now call on Mark Ruskell to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, I think it's clear that there is no war on the motorists. I think it's a bit silly to suggest that there is. But I absolutely think, though, that what we do see on our roads every single day is congestion misery. Motorists face congestion misery. So we should be tackling congestion. And we can only tackle congestion when the costs of public transport fall relative to the private car, and when better reliability, punctuality and frequency make bus and rail the natural choice for commuters where they have that choice available. I think facts are really important in this debate. And I ask members to reflect on the fact that since this Parliament was established, the number of cars on the roads have increased by 38%, mileage has gone up 16%, while at the same time the cost of motoring has decreased by 19%, rail fares have increased by 31%, and bus and coach fares have raised by an eye-watering 102% in real terms. And it's quite clear that successive governments have prioritised car dependency And those choosing or relying on public transport are continually being disadvantaged by government policy. Transport is the biggest climate polluter, and private cars pollute the most. Actions are needed to reduce private car usage and demand. Otherwise, other parts of our economy will have to pick up more of the burden in order to get to net zero. So a traffic reduction target backed by deliverable actions is needed now more than ever. And dropping the 20% target, Minister, was a real backward step, sending out the wrong message, removing the focus, undermining the partnership action needed on the ground to prioritise public transport and active travel. If there's time in hand, I'd welcome.
There's very limited time.
Okay,
Minister, briefly.
Would the member not accept that dropping the target that was set was because it was absolutely unachievable? However, the new guidance is clear.
Could the Minister please speak into his microphone? Thank you.
My apologies. That it's clear now that it's actually only a 7% reduction that is needed. And what we're doing today is working together to bring together the kinds of initiatives that will allow us to do what it is that we all want to achieve in this chamber.
Mark Ruskell.
I asked the Minister to reflect on what Duncan Cameron from First Group told Parliament just yesterday. He said that dropping the 20% target represents a huge missed opportunity. There was the opportunity there to actually bring this partnership action working together and to have a clear focus. You know, targets without measurable actions are doomed to fail. And despite publishing the draft route map to reduce that congestion with COSLA 3 years ago, the plan is yet to be agreed. I think when it comes back to COSLA at the end of this week, I think it will be gutted. I think all the meaningful action will be taken out of it. And all the actions that local authorities such as Edinburgh and Glasgow really want to put in place to start to tackle congestion, start to deliver investment, will be left wanting in that plan. And I think we need to reflect on the fact that progress, particularly on road charging, has been absolutely non-existent in Scotland. We're 22 years on now from the introduction of the congestion charge in London, which is now just accepted as a normal part of everyday life, and it raises significant revenue for public transport investment. It is time to support those local authorities who want to choose to introduce road user charging, such as Edinburgh and Glasgow, to deliver, no, I don't have any time, sorry, Mr Mountain, to deliver those right models for them to cut congestion and to raise money. Encouraging people to choose to leave the car at home is not only good for the climate, it's about cleaner air and safer streets, a healthier society and a stronger economy. And there's lots of evidence from around the world, Europe, other cities across the UK, of where it's been beneficial for the economy to actually reduce road congestion. But we do need champions, Presiding Officer, to lead this debate with facts. It needs to be a cross-party effort, not just here at Holyrood and at Westminster, but in our town halls as well. Because this is also about fairness. Car-dependent transport systems drive economic and socio-economic inequalities. 1 in 5 households in Scotland do not have access to a car. Car use is lower amongst women, disabled people and older people. These groups are likely to rely more on public transport. So simply pointing to a growing number of EV charging points really patronises those people who can't drive. We can do better than this. This government needs to empower those councils who are ready and willing to take action now, and to create vibrant, inclusive places where the car is the guest and communities can grow and thrive.
Thank you, Mr Ruskell. I now call Alex Cole-Hamilton to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please. Thank
you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to the Liberal Democrats in this debate. Liberal Democrats, Presiding Officer, are certainly committed to tackling the climate crisis whilst building healthier and more connected communities. Two things can be true at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. And some of our communities, as I alluded to in my intervention on Sue Webber, are not connected in the way that we would like them. And this is a failure of government. Reducing the number of cars on the roads does cut carbon emissions. There's no question of that. It improves air quality, reduces congestion, all the while making our towns and rural communities safer and more pleasant places to live. At the same time, it's important that public transport and active travel are realistic, accessible alternatives. Too often in Scotland, travelling by car is cheaper, it's easier than public transport, and that's just completely the wrong way around. We're not going to make any progress here while that remains the case. So we need to ensure that local bus and rail networks are fit for purpose and affordable. But this government has presided on fewer and fewer journeys every year by public transport, particularly in rural and semi-rural areas, which are often left behind and where, without a car, people often have no other option. It's right that we encourage active travel by creating safe, direct walking and cycling routes, which mean more people feel able to leave their cars at home, whether for the school run, the daily commute or the trip to the shops. That's a win-win for cutting pollution, promoting tourism and improving people's health. However, I do understand the frustration that communities feel, especially when measures are taken that affect them without their having any say. We need to win hearts and minds. Presiding Officer, I am a massive fan of the idea of low-traffic neighbourhoods. I am really interested in what's happened in Waltham Forest, but I'm also interested in the 5 layers of consultation that went behind that. When the City of Edinburgh Council tried to impose a low-traffic neighbourhood on my community of East Craigs in the days of the pandemic, they did so without consultation if the 7,000 homes would have been affected, and as such have really set back the hearts and minds. I'm afraid I actually need to make progress. I only have 4 minutes, if you'll forgive me. But by so doing, they have set back the interest that community might have had in what was already quite a low-traffic neighbourhood in the first place. Lib Dems have also made it crystal clear that the dualling of the A9 is an absolute priority for my party. At our spring conference in Inverness, my party backed the campaign to dual the A9, making it a manifesto promise. I'm really sorry, I must make progress for next year's election. That's about saving lives. It's not about a charter for motorists, it's a charter for road safety. These roads, the A9, the A96, the A82, have a body count every year that if we saw it in Glasgow, between Edinburgh and Glasgow on the M8, our diggers would be out there now widening those roads. It remains, the A9 in particular, remains one of the most dangerous roads in the United Kingdom. And, Presiding Officer, it only took NASA 9 years to get to the moon after John Kennedy made that pledge. It has taken the SNP nearly 20 years to make very glacial progress towards dualling the A9. They came to power in 2007 with a promise to do just that. This is so important, not just for the Highland economy, but for the safety of its users. 335 people have been killed on the Perth to Inverness stretch of the A9 since 1979. 335 people. 13 people died in 2022 alone. Presiding Officer, we can't just let this continue to happen. That's why myself, Sarah Davey, Angus MacDonald, our candidate for Skylock Harbour and Badenoch, Andrew Baxter, our candidate for Keith Nesson, Sutherland and Ross.
Mr Cole-Hamilton, please resume your seat for a second. I appreciate that there is an election coming up, albeit not until next year, but we're not in a kind of hustings. We're in a parliament, and I would hope the member would act accordingly. Please conclude, and thank you.
We'll conclude, Presiding Officer, but just a measure of the passion we all feel and why we signed the Inverness Couriers pledge to dual the A9, because we know how vital this is, not just to our Highland economy, but to the safety of the road users trying to get to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cole-Hamilton. We now move to the open debate. Backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes. I call Liam Kerr to be followed by Kevin Stewart. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's been said that the epitome of the SNP's war on Scottish motorists is the low emission zone, and the exemplar of the folly of these schemes is the Aberdeen LEZ. In force since June 2024, it swiftly claimed the record for the most fines issued in a month, with more than 6,000 slapped on North East motorists. It was a significant contributor to statistics showing the Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Dundee LEZs collectively issued 58,000 fines to drivers, worth more than £6.3 million in the first 6 months. Presiding Officer, many people from across Scotland have contacted me, raising the regressive social impacts of LEZs, suggesting they disproportionately impact lower-income households, who are more likely to have older cars or jobs that require their physical presence, or travel to work, to and from work at times and places where public transport is less frequent or indeed absent. The Minister proudly says that LEZs are throughout Europe, but he failed to mention Madrid's LEZ, which a court annulled last year as its economic consequences disproportionately impacted low-income residents. Yet, Presiding Officer, an FOI asking Aberdeen Council which postcodes were generating the record numbers of fines received the response that no such analysis is being done. Furthermore, many constituents, I'll come back after I make my proposition, Paul. Many constituents and businesses have raised concerns to me at the impact on Union Street and Aberdeen city centre, reporting reduced footfall, people choosing alternative shopping options, or even just not going into town. Authority for that is that I've got my hands on reports from traders in towns surrounding Aberdeen suggesting their footfall and businesses rocketed after the introduction of the LEZ and the bus gates. One councillor in the Shire said, "Of course it's massively helping our Aberdeenshire hospitality and retail outlets, which are seeing a marked lift in business." But when I asked Aberdeen Council what research they were doing on the impact of LEZ on footfall, spend and consumer choices, well, you guessed it, they are not collating that data. And finally, members may recall that the stated aim of the SNP's LEZs was to reduce carbon emissions and improve air quality. Now, when I asked the Council when they would be measuring the air quality in the LEZ so that presumably they could show the intended reduction in emissions and justify their draconian measures and appalling economic and social impacts, I was told there is no published information, nor is there any data comparing emissions reductions, if any, within the LEZ against increases in emissions from diverted traffic and additional vehicle miles travelled. So the Council has brought in an LEZ and it has no idea if it's actually achieved any emissions reductions. Paul Sweeney.
Paul Sweeney.
Important point about the issue of low emission zones, and particularly Madrid's example. One other good example from Madrid is how efficiently they've built their metro system. I think it's the most cost efficient per mile anywhere in the world. Could we do more in Scotland to benchmark excellent infrastructure projects like the Madrid Metro and build more of that kind of infrastructure here?
Liam Kerr.
I think we could definitely be doing more in Scotland. Unfortunately, we'll never be doing any more in Scotland while we've got an SNP government in place. Presiding Officer, people will begin to suspect that far from being about emissions reduction, this is about the SNP bringing in a scheme, the LEZ, to generate money for the councils they so woefully underfund from exorbitant fines on drivers. Presiding Officer, the reality is that Aberdeen's LEZ is hammering businesses and our great city centre. It is disproportionately hitting those of lesser means. It is unlikely to be having any significant impact on emissions. And you know, alongside the Aberdeen bus gates, it is the embodiment of virtue signalling, ideologically led, unevidenced policy making on the hoof. And the sooner both are consigned to history, the better for all of us.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. I call Kevin Stewart to be followed by Becan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In a move that would make the US President proud, the Tory party today have lodged a Trumpian word salad of emotion, calling for an end to the Scottish Government's so-called war on motorists, using the low-emission zone in Aberdeen as an example of bad policy. So it may come as a bit of a surprise for some to find out which party was in control of Aberdeen City Council when the low-emission zone for Aberdeen was proposed. It was, of course, the Tories. And now the same Tories are demanding that the Scottish Government stops councillors, including Tories, from embarking on schemes in the future. Just so we are having a debate based on facts and not fiction, let's have the actual history of the Aberdeen low-emission zone. On the 6th of February 2020, Aberdeen Council City Growth and Resources Committee unanimously agreed to the move, along with holding public and stakeholder engagement on options for a city centre low-emission zone. We already know that the Tories were the party in charge, along with their Labour allies at the time, but who was the committee convener? I'll give you a clue. He's sitting on the Tory benches, or was, Mr Douglas Lumsden, MSP. The Aberdeen LEZ was proposed by a Tory-led committee in a Tory-led council. But it doesn't stop there. In response to the Tory plan for a low-emission zone in Aberdeen, the co-leader of Aberdeen City Council said this, and I quote, "The unanimous decision today is to be welcomed, as we are committed to reducing emissions across Aberdeen and particularly in the city centre." Now, who was the council leader so supportive of the low-emission zone? Of course, it was Mr Douglas Lumsden himself, who showered praise on his own low-emission zone. But yet again, it doesn't stop there. Just a month later, Armed with his plan for a low-emission zone, Douglas Lumsden presented the annual Aberdeen Council budget, where he proudly stated, and I quote, "We approved a low-emission zone for the city, and that this is our commitment, the Tories' commitment and contribution to delivering an ambitious low-emission zone within the heart of our city." Presiding Officer, it's more than a little rich for the Tories to be standing up today to demand that the Scottish Government protect the motorist from low-emission zones when they were proudly calling the Aberdeen low-emission zone theirs in 2020. And let us be crystal clear. The low-emission zone in Aberdeen wasn't just proposed under Mr Lumsden and the Tories. They started implementing the work. And a year and a half later, in October 2021, when Mr Lumsden was also on the council as well as being here, he said proudly, he said that it was good to see work continuing on the project. But we in Aberdeen are not unforgiving, Presiding Officer. And although in his 2020 budget speech announcing his funding of the low-emission zone, Mr Lumsden proudly stood up and told the Lord Provost of Aberdeen that he would, and I quote, "make no apologies for his low-emission zone." So he can always take the opportunity to apologise to this chamber today if he now thinks it was such a bad idea. Or is this just another example of Tory hypocrisy, opportunism and nonsense?
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I now call Megan Gallagher to be followed by Paul Sweeney. Ms Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And to bring some common sense back to the chamber, I will echo what Sue Webber has said in her opening remarks. The SNP have indeed declared war on Scotland's motorists. Whether that be low-emission zones, potholes crumbling away without being refilled, or proposed reductions in speed limits, they are making life more difficult for people who choose to own a car. Oh, this will be good.
Gordon MacDonald.
It is. Since 2010, under the Conservatives, vehicle excise duty has risen for new cars from £1,200 to £2,605, and car insurance premium tax went up from 5% in 2010 to 12% in 2017. Which party is it again that's got a war on motorists?
Megan Gallagher.
It is the SNP who has a war on motorists, and I'll go in and explain why in a second. I represent a commuter region. Many people who live across the central belt of Scotland travel to and from our major cities for work, school and university. Good transport links, affordable prices and reliability of public services are essential for those towns and villages. However, whether that be train, bus or car, the SNP have punished Scotland's commuters. Two of the busiest motorways run through central Scotland, the M74 and the M8. They are designed to be the easiest routes to travel on if you live in North Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire or Falkirk to reach Glasgow or Edinburgh. Constituents write to me on a regular basis to tell me how these congested roads are, especially during rush hours. Journey time from Newhouse roundabout to Edinburgh city centre can take up to 2 hours in the morning, despite only travelling 31 miles. The SNP needs to announce a plan to alleviate the pressures on our busiest roads, and they cannot simply remove the choice of driving for people who want to drive just because they cannot reach their own emission targets. But of course, Presiding Officer, it's not just commuters who have felt the force of the SNP's war on Scotland's motorists. Donald MacLeod, owner of Glasgow nightclubs The Garage and the Cat House Rock Club, believes that Glasgow's low-emission zone restrictions in the city have had a lasting impact on the nighttime economy. Glasgow was once regarded as a retail powerhouse, a desired location where many of my constituents would regularly visit for social and retail use. However, many parts of the city are now derelict, with boards on the shop windows, closing down signs, outnumbering those businesses who are struggling to stay open. Since the introduction of the city's LEZ, the dramatic drop in footfall across the country has had, in Donald MacLeod's own words, turned Glasgow into a low economy zone. This is the real lasting impact of the SNP's anti-motorist agenda. It's bad for business and it's bad for economic growth. He and other business owners have called on Glasgow City Council to lift the ban on low-emission zone restrictions in the city from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to help revive Glasgow's struggling nighttime economy. And that's just one of many suggestions that have been brought forward by business owners who are desperately trying to find solutions to problems that have been created by governments. Returning to the point that I have made at the start of my contribution, should there be good, reliable and affordable public transport, people may make the switch that will not only help reduce emissions naturally, but would provide Scotland's commuters with a choice. They don't have that choice at present, and that's why the SNP needs to get a grip of public transport and provide a network that people have confidence in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Gallagher. I call Paul Sweeney to be followed by Colin Beattie. Mr Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Whilst I sympathise with some elements of the motion tabled today, I think the framing of it is deeply facile and disingenuous. Because the reality is transport in Scotland is a critical issue affecting national life. It is a critical issue that will connect people to jobs, economic opportunities, and that velocity of movement and connection between people generates growth and prosperity for the communities we are elected to represent. That's why it is so important. So I think distilling it down simply into this idea of some sort of war isn't entirely helpful. I do recognise there are flaws in the delivery of public policy in this area, and I think there has been a tendency towards focusing on punitive measures at the expense of actually proper long-term strategic investment. So if we take an example, Glasgow, which I represent, of course, accounts for 20% of Scotland's economy, and it is estimated by Centre for Cities that the underperformance of the Glasgow economy costs Scotland £7 billion a year, and that is largely down to the dysfunctional nature of its public transport system. Whilst Glasgow's public transport system performs relatively well at a UK level, it is severely underperforming relative to its European peers, and that is something that must be addressed. Certainly the Government has worked with Glasgow City Council on the development of measures such as the Connectivity Commission, which was 7 years ago, and no further progress. Other cities around Europe have moved far ahead in terms of investments in metro systems, extending trams, delivering regulation of buses in the case of Manchester, and I do worry that the pace of improvement is nowhere near where it needs to be. There are three main reasons why this is important in my view. Because Glasgow's economy is underperforming relative to its peers, and that is equivalent to 4.5% of Scotland's GDP. It's a huge prize to be won if we can unlock that potential. If we can just get Glasgow to the level of competitiveness with European cities of a similar size like Munich, we can unlock huge amounts of opportunity for this country. Similarly, and a second point is that Glasgow actually has the lowest rate of car ownership in the UK. 41% of Glaswegians don't own a car, according to the 2011 census, which is well above Britain's average of 26%. That makes Glasgow more dependent on the performance of its public transport network and accentuates social inequality in the city, which is already problematic. And it isn't helped by having a major motorway running through the heart of the city, which again reduces incentives to improve public transport because the richest and most prosperous people in the city region can enjoy the benefits of a private car, which isn't accessible to the poorest households. And similarly, and third, transport choices, of course, have environmental implications. So air pollution is a bigger problem in urban centres like Glasgow compared to more rural areas. And poor air quality does disproportionately affect the poorest people in Glasgow, the poorest neighbourhoods that border a motorway like the M8 that runs through the heart of the city. And indeed, the biggest public... I'll happy to give way to the Minister.
Briefly, Minister.
Therefore, would the member recognise and celebrate the fact that Glasgow City Council have actually spent over £500,000 from the money that they took from LEZs into tree planting in order to improve the environment in Glasgow city centre?
Paul Sweeney.
Well, it's good, but I mean, it's a tokenistic measure in grand scheme of things. Like £500,000 is a drop in the ocean. We need £500 million. We need £5 billion in Glasgow. That's the kind of money we're talking about, Minister. That's what we need to get into Glasgow to build Clyde Metro, to actually deliver the scale of investment that other European cities enjoy. That's what we need to get real about. We need to go big or go home on this one. Clyde Metro still remains a nebulous project. And we're nowhere near fulfilling the true benefits of the city. I don't understand why there's such a negative feedback loop where we're getting ever greater congestion on our roads. Buses are performing less efficiently because of that rising congestion, and we have this doom loop of increasing problems where actually the biggest capital investment in Glasgow's transport system is over £150 million patching up a 1970s motorway viaduct through Cowcaddens. It simply isn't coherent, and we need to see a much better approach from this government to unlock the true potential of a city like Glasgow, which can benefit Scotland as a whole.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. And I call Colin Beattie.
Earlier this year, the Scottish Government was forced to abandon its target for reducing car use by 20% by 2030. It was an ambitious goal, which unfortunately couldn't be met. The measures taken to attempt to reach this target do not equate to a war on motorists, as some would like to characterise it. We must reduce car emissions to tackle the climate crisis, through making public transport more affordable and accessible while maintaining the road infrastructure so many still rely on. More carrot and only as much stick as needed. Reducing our reliance on cars while ensuring our roads are safe is of the utmost importance. The Scottish Government's £36 million investment in road safety this year is a welcome step. It's vital that this funding supports behavioural change and helps local authorities improve their road infrastructure. The Conservative motion references the National Speed Management Review, and this is not a golden bullet, but simply a tool in ensuring that all speed limits are fit for their purpose. We know from international experience in France that a reduction in speed limits can reduce casualties, and I'm sure that members in this chamber take road safety seriously, and our policies must reflect that. Of course, cars will always have a place in our transport system, especially in rural areas of the country. But the environmental impact of widespread car use cannot be understated. Cars make up 39% of all transport emissions and 12.4% of Scotland's total emissions. That's a reality. We can't ignore it. We must move towards zero-emission vehicles and build a sustainable public transport network. I'm sorry, there's only 4 minutes. But when trying to change travel behaviours, we must take the public with us. We can't allow the narrative that this is a war against the public's interest to lie, but prove that it will benefit lives. The Conservative Party's opposition to low-emission zones is both deeply irresponsible and not in the least surprising. Let's be clear, no member in this chamber would let children drink dirty water, so why should we let them breathe polluted air? Especially after a Dundee University study which found that respiratory admissions for children were significantly higher in areas with poor air quality. Placing politics above public health would be shameful, and I'm pleased that the Scottish Government has shown leadership in this. The Scottish Government has also made progress with the country's electric vehicle charging network. We now have the highest number of public EV charging devices per head of population of any UK nation. But electric vehicles remain expensive, especially during a cost of living crisis. And that's why we must focus on developing more incentives, such as affordable EV loans, to help families switch to an eco-friendly alternative. Public transport is key in reaching our net zero targets and for our economy. We've already seen the benefits of a public interest approach to transport. ScotRail's nationalisation has delivered major improvements, including higher passenger satisfaction and fewer compensation claims compared to other UK rail companies. The peak rail fare scrapping scheme unfortunately didn't produce the desired shift in travel habits, but this should be a message to the Government to continue to work towards incentivising a shift. But progress must also reach our rural communities. In rural Scotland, the car is often not a convenience but a necessity. Bus services are not as frequent, and passenger satisfaction is lower than that in the Central Belt. If we're serious about reducing car use, we must work with local authorities to invest and improve rural bus routes to ensure communities remain connected. Public transport is a lifeline for some of these communities. In conclusion, describing the Scottish Government's aim to reduce car use as a war is a gross mischaracterisation. It's not a war and is a necessity to meet our climate targets and improve transport for all in Scotland. The road ahead requires balance, supporting behavioural change with investment, encouraging greener choices by affordability, whilst maintaining our road infrastructure, ensuring the safety of all our constituents.
Thank you, Mr Beattie. I now call, we move to closing speeches, and I call on Mark Ruskell to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. I think we've been subject to a blizzard of local press releases here this afternoon and election pitches, but I would agree with Paul Sweeney that the motion for this debate is somewhat facile and disingenuous, and we do need a much more measured debate on this. And I guess I would turn to the Minister really and ask the Minister to acknowledge that on transport policy we are taking one step forward at a time, but we're often then taking one step back. I'll give the example of bus use. Under 22s, fantastic scheme. I know he backs it. He recognises the benefit that's brought to young people. It's also increased bus use by 29 million journeys. But at the same time as we've been rolling out that scheme, that successful scheme, we've seen bus journeys decline by 20 million because of road congestion, because of the discussion that we're having here this afternoon about the failure to really tackle traffic congestion. It is undermining those hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds that have been put into investing in bus users, investing in the bus network every single year. So we do need to see what was called policy coherence back in the day, Minister. One policy not undermining another one. We can't have a transport policy just based on more of everything that everybody wants. There has to be choices here. That's why we have a transport hierarchy. That should be guiding investment. And I think when Confederation of Passenger Transport came to committee this week and gave evidence, they stated quite clearly that it's competition from cars which is the primary influence on bus use. So unless we tackle that issue, unless we level the playing field, we're not going to see a rapid increase in bus use. Choices need to be made here. I don't have time, unfortunately. Choices need to be made here. And I would simply ask the Minister as well to reflect on the construction of the Crosstail Link Road, £120 million going into investing in that transport infrastructure to benefit motorists. But already we're starting to see congestion issues around Perth and Bridgend, which, of course, the bridge was meant to solve. So, I think we need to move away from one step forward, one step back. We need to absolutely address the issues here. And this is not a new debate. This is not a new debate. Back in 2006, the first ever climate inquiry in this Parliament recommended road user charging. It set the executive at the time a timescale of 10 years to get this right. They had till 2016 to bring in a fair system of road user charging. That date's gone, and we're now 10 years on from 2016, 2026, and we still have no more progress in Scotland on road user charging. So it's going to take calm heads, it's going to take cross-party working in order to make progress on this, and perhaps the kind of leadership that was shown by Douglas Lumsden when he was a councillor, Kevin Stewart. It sounded like rational, kind of taking your party hat off and just kind of looking at the issues that need to be addressed. We saw that kind of we can see that kind of leadership from time to time in councils. And I think the conversation, Minister, with COSLA going forward is really important, because it's clear that there are those in the local authorities who need and they want to tackle traffic congestion. They want to do it through a range of measures. So I would urge the government to make some progress on areas where I think we do have a consensus. There's a regulatory review at the moment that's looking at powers of road charging. We could be looking at simplifying the traffic regulation order process, decriminalising road offences. I think there's an area of consensus amongst councils and government that we can use to get some progress going forward. Just very briefly, Presiding Officer, I think, again, I welcome the support from the Minister for re-regulation of buses. I would urge him to make that process as simple as possible, because it's absolutely clear that we need public transport being run in the public interest. We can only really achieve that if we have public operators and community operators in that mix. But I think it's a short debate. I'm sure we'll come back to this between now and the end of this session. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Ruskell. And I call Sarah Boyack again, up to 4 minutes. Ms Boyack.
Thank you. I think the language used in the Tory motion doesn't reflect reality, and it's been criticised a lot around the chamber this afternoon. But actually, it's been Some good points made in this debate today. I think it's clear to a lot of us that the SNP government dumped its 20% reduction in car use because it knew it wasn't going to deliver and it didn't have a plan. And several colleagues have talked about the need to lower carbon emissions right across the country if we're going to address the climate emergency, because we're now seeing extreme weather leading to increased flooding and forest fires in Scottish communities. Transport is a key sector where we face a challenge in reducing our emissions, but we need to do it in a way that actually is going to see people with better choices, more affordable, accessible, reliable public transport services that they can use. And also, we need to think about how we have safer roads. I'm going to come back to that because that's been raised several times. And think about people's health and improving air quality. And as Mark Ruskell finished his wind-up speech, we've not seen the bus and train services that people urgently need in Scotland. It's a key message from young people. They love the idea of the under-22 bus pass, but as one of them said in a meeting I was at, it's not much use if you don't have a bus to use it on. So we've got opportunities, but we're not delivering on them. And as Claire Baker powerfully argued in her opening speech, reintroducing peak rail fares after they'd increased passenger use by 6% was a mistake, because it's going to stop people using their trains, and it's going to mean they have to revert to using a car to get back to work. And 3 price hikes in just over a year is disproportionately punishing those who chose to use the train instead of driving. And that means we're seeing roads that are more and more congested, and people have to use cars, even when it's not necessarily their first choice, even when it's not affordable for them, because they simply can't rely on buses, particularly if they have a bus route but it's actually delayed by traffic congestion. So there's a real challenge here, and in many of our rural communities or edge of towns, people don't even have the transport services at all, and we don't have a connected system between bus and rail. So it's not about a war on drivers. This debate should be about how do we provide people with real, affordable choices, with more efficient, reliable public transport choices across Scotland, and safer active travel, especially for shorter journeys. And actually, instead of increasing car use, we might reduce car use, have less cars on the road, and actually make it easier for people who are driving not to get stuck in traffic queues. And there's been quite a lot of debate about low emission zones. They are reducing carbon emissions and improving air quality. I think one of the things that was interesting in Edinburgh was learning from Glasgow's experience to work with businesses before the LEZ was introduced. The other thing in Edinburgh, and I'm down to my last minute, the SNP has let Scotland's roads crumble, and that was probably one of the few things I agreed with the opening speech from Sue Webber. Scotland's road repair backlog for potholes has now risen to an eye-watering £2.6 billion. That means it's not safe for people walking and cycling. It's not good for bikes and vehicles where potholes damage tyres and increase people's costs. And in Edinburgh, the Labour-led council had to make difficult choices in its budget because of years of underfunding by the SNP government. But the cross-party rejected the cuts to pothole funding suggested by the SNP councillors. So we need to make sure that we get that cross-party work. With better choices, more and more people would actually have a choice of when they use their car, instead of having more congestion and delays. Anyone who's driven on the Edinburgh bypass will know it regularly grinds to a halt because there are just far too many vehicles on it. So we need more joined up thinking between public transport organisations, but more choices for people. And that's not happening at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed. And I call the Minister up to 5 minutes. Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'd genuinely like to express my gratitude to members across the Chamber for very valuable contributions and some of the consensus that we can work on going forward, which I and the Cabinet Secretary are very happy to do. Now, we have to accept we are predominantly a rural and sparsely populated country, and I recognise that opportunities to change the mode in remote rural communities are limited, and switching to electric vehicles will be of higher importance to those areas than it is in the cities. But it's clear by contributions from members that we agree on many things: the provision of high-quality, affordable transport options to reduce travel costs, to take climate action, and the need to offer sustainable and affordable alternative to private cars. And I'd encourage that continuous productive engagement across those in the Chamber who are prepared to do so. It's widely accepted that LEZs are an effective and necessary tool to reduce pollution and therefore to protect public health. And their introduction is something the four cities in this government can be rightly proud of. I also recognise and I'm thankful for the investment that responsible businesses and vehicle owners have already made to continue to make LEZs work. As I said before, Glasgow have invested £500,000 of this revenue in tree planting and greening projects and a broader climate action. But I think this is probably the point where I should actually applaud Kevin Stewart for his hitting the Tory hypocrisy on the head on the LEZs in Aberdeen. And I wonder where Mr Lumsden is right now. Road safety in Scotland is a key concern. And our aim is for Scotland to have the best safety performance in the world by 2030. Yet in 2024, there were 167 road fatalities. And I will take interventions if I get time. But I will take interventions if I get time. Right now, I'm going to get through these really important points, and I'd urge the member to listen. Road safety in Scotland is a key concern. And our aim is for Scotland to have the best safety performance in the world by 2030. Yet in 2024, there were 167 road fatalities, an 8% rise from 2023. And the early signs suggest that 2025 is following a similar trend. The evidence is clear that reducing national speed limit on single carriageways by 10 miles an hour can reduce fatalities on these roads by 23% and serious injuries by 18%. And it's a step that will save lives while maintaining journey times. Now, unlike the Conservatives, Presiding Officer, we are awaiting the outcome of the National Speed Management Review public consultation before proposing any changes. The review is complete but is not yet reported on. The public consultation had over 19,500 responses, over 26 public engagements, so we will wait for the outcome of that review before we make any decisions, and I would urge members across the chamber to consider that point as we go forward. This is not a war on motorists. It's a responsible government action to protect lives, to improve journey time reliability and to future-proof our transport network. And we will always be guided when it comes to safeguarding lives on Scotland's roads. Very quickly.
Briefly, Finlay Carson.
Is it true that the Minister would rather see a reduction of 10 miles an hour on the routes such as the A75 Euro route rather than the government doing the right thing and invest in that road and make it a dual carriageway?
Yeah. Minister.
I'm going to dismiss the point that the member is making. I've already stated what the point behind the review is, and that's what we'll be working on. Scotland has one of the most comprehensive public charging networks in the UK, and we've reached our target of 6,000 public charge points 2 years early, and per head of population have more rapid public charging points than any other part of the UK except for the South East. Now, I welcome the introduction of the UK government. I'm sorry, I just don't have time today. I welcome the introduction of the UK Government regulations on public EV charging, including those concerning charge point reliability. And I would urge all charge point operators to adhere to these regulations and ensure that drivers receive the level of service that they rightly expect. There's a couple of points I'd like to try to make very quickly. One is that I'm quite sure that members across the chamber will celebrate the fact that Fiona Hislop is in Tomatin today, marking the start of those works. But I would also remind this chamber that when we talk about the delays in the A9 getting dualled, that this chamber actually forced the SNP to transfer funding from the A9 to the trams network quite a number of years ago, and I think that's a point worth making. Mark Ruskell talks about we need to give local authorities more opportunities to make public transport work, and I absolutely agree. So the 2019 Transport Act gives them those opportunities. And road congestion, I agree, which is why I'm continuing to engage with the Road Traffic Commissioner. But I see that I'm coming to the end of my time, Convener, so I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And now call on Graham Simpson to wind up the debate up to 6 minutes. Mr Simpson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's been an interesting debate. I mean, I use the word interesting to be generous, of course, because it hasn't really told us anything we didn't know already, and that's that there are parties in this Parliament who are anti-motorists, and that includes the one in government. Now, Sue Webber's motion covers all bases, as did Ms Webber, but there's a lot to say. We've billed this as ending Scotland's war on motorists, and it can feel that way sometimes. But before I get into the various points raised, I'd like to start by praising the Cabinet Secretary, because last week at the Public Audit Committee, she was honest enough to admit to me that the target to cut car miles by a fifth by 2030 is dead in the water. In fact, it was never possible because to do so would mean taking even more punitive measures against motorists than we already have and require an improvement in public transport provision, the carrot that we need to encourage people to use their cars less. It would need to increase by 222%, according to Transport Scotland. But given that we have a government that's reintroduced peak fares on trains and isn't off the starting line when it comes to having integrated ticketing, then it's not going to happen. As the Auditor-General said of the now axed car reduction target, there never was a delivery plan. He didn't say that the reason for that is because the actions needed would be unpalatable. Our motion calls on the government to incentivise people to use their cars less. That's entirely right. I don't want to drive everywhere, but I do most journeys by car because there's no viable alternative for me. If I'm in Edinburgh and need to get about, then I often use the excellent public transport system here, or walk or cycle. In East Kilbride, where I live, and the rest of central Scotland, it's not so great. Megan Gallagher and other members from that region know that very well. Now, yes, I'll take an intervention.
Briefly.
I think the member makes an excellent point about East Kilbride and the fact that the recent investment in the upgrading, so-called upgrading of the East Kilbride line to Glasgow won't dual track it, so it can't actually extend its frequency to a useful turn-up-and-go level where you can actually just turn up and get the train within a reasonable time.
Graham Simpson.
Well, that's entirely correct, but I am looking forward to the line reopening on May the 18th. Now, we tend to think of motorists as people who jump into their car for a journey, but it's surely just anyone who drives, and that could be for a living, as Sue Webber said. Bus drivers, lorry drivers, van drivers, tradesmen, they're all motorists, and they're all vital to the economy. So while it's true that transport I haven't got time, like you, Minister. So while it's true that transport is the biggest emitting sector, it's also true that the economy can't function without it. People and goods need to get about, and we should be making it easier, not harder. And that's why it's essential that roads like the A9 and the A96 are fully dualled, and the M8 improved, as frustrated driver Megan Gallagher called for, and it's why the move by the SNP to cut the national speed limit on single carriageway roads to 50 miles an hour is wrong. The right approach should be to take a local approach. There are some such roads where driving at 60 is crazy. Change them, but not everything else. Now, we've already seen measures put in place to make life difficult for people. Low-emission zones, which penalise those who can't afford newer vehicles, are an example. Glasgow went first, starting its enforcement in June 2023 and botched it. They were followed by Dundee, Aberdeen and Edinburgh. And Liam Kerr has told us in no uncertain terms about the impact in Aberdeen. And that's not to mention, well, I'm about to mention Mr Stewart, because Mr Stewart, Kevin Stewart, actually gave an unusually amusing speech and revealed my colleague Douglas Lumsden to be a cheerleader for LEZs, and perhaps, and he's back. Mr Lumsden's back from his tour of LEZs. That's good. So now you would think that the nonsense would stop, but you would be wrong, because we now know, thanks to evidence supplied by COSLA and Transport Scotland to the Public Audit Committee last week, that Scotland's largest councils, Glasgow and Edinburgh, want to continue to wage war on their citizens with plans to introduce road pricing. The Glasgow Transport Strategy commits Glasgow City Council to lobby the Scottish Government to introduce national road user charging, which would allow for regional schemes. Edinburgh want to go down the same route if necessary, and you can bet your bottom dollar that they will consider it necessary. And that can only happen if we give them the powers to do so, and we shouldn't. Presiding Officer, Scotland is a diverse and very rural country. People need to drive. We should not, as some in this chamber want to, treat motorists as the enemy. Cars and other vehicles are essential. let's treat them as such.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on ending the war against Scotland's motorists. It's time to move on to the next item of business, but there will be a brief pause to allow front benches to change before we do so.